Good morning, everybody, and a happy Saturday morning to you. I hope your week went well. We've got another really long video for you guys. I know how much you love my longer videos. We have quite a lot of royal news to get through, and of course, we're going to check in on what the royal family's been up to. But, yeah, we have another big story. Meghan's bullying allegations have resurfaced. My goodness. So, of course, you know me, I went back to look at some of the recent footage from Meghan and a little further back with the mask clips. We have a lot of moments to cover. So let's just jump in and get busy because there's so much to look at. Let's go. We're going to start with Prince George. He's just weeks away from starting Eton College this September, which is a boarding school following in the steps of his father, Prince William. This will be quite a change for George. You know, up until now, he's been attending school alongside his brother and his sister. This will be his first time as a full-time boarding student. But there's some good news for him. According to the Eton's term schedule, there's longer school holidays known as long leave, and then they have shorter breaks called short leave. And the first short leave is scheduled for October 2nd through October 4th, which means he'll have the opportunity to return home only a few weeks after school starts. Another detail is that he's going to have his own private bedroom, and that's not a special treatment. Every boy at Eton has his own study bedroom. It's designed to give students their own private space to teach them independent organization, etc., etc. William did the same thing. They have to manage their own responsibilities, tasks, and deadlines. Continuing on, we have another big milestone for the younger generation of the royal family. James, Earl of Wessex, the 18-year-old son of Prince Edward and Sophie, the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh, is heading to university in the fall. He received his A-level results on August 13th, along with hundreds of thousands of other students across England, Wales, and Northern Ireland, and Buckingham Palace has now confirmed he will attend the Royal Agricultural University, where he'll study rural land and property management. Now that makes a lot of sense when you look at what he's been doing over the summer, because he spent part of his summer working on King Charles's Sandringham estate, getting hands-on experience with farming and estate work. You know, being the king's nephew didn't get him out of the dirty work. He was perfectly willing to get his hands dirty, they're saying. So he also is not taking a gap year. He will go directly to college in the fall to start his studies. Of course, that's different from like what William did, who took a gap year after Eton before going to St. Andrews. Now, James's university is only a few miles from King Charles's Highgrove estate, so he might be able to wing by there, I guess, whenever he wants. After getting the fabulous news about their son, the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh joined UK Athletics president Dame Denise Lewis to watch Day 4 of the 2026 European Athletics Championships. The event took place at Alexander Stadium in Birmingham, and it marks the first time the UK has hosted this tournament. Now, it was very hot there, 96 Fahrenheit or 36 Celsius, and they arrived in matching shades of blue. I guess they were trying to stay cool. Now, the two of them, the Duke and Duchess, spent time chatting with Miss Lewis as well as the World Athletics president, Sebastian Coe. They took extra time during their visit to personally meet and thank the event volunteers, keeping the stadium running during the severe heat wave. Going back to James, I just have to tell you, he is 17th in line to the throne, and he has been dubbed Britain's most eligible bachelor since he turned 18 in December. Well, he's tall, he's good looking, he takes after his dad. I'm sure he'll do well in school. A big thank you, as usual, to Remoulade Sauce and to Carol M. for showing us everything that Sophie was wearing on this very hot day. Let's continue. Okay, I had to throw this in just because I found it so interesting. Apparently, Queen Victoria routinely manipulated her official pictures long before digital editing, court photographers. You know, they used to use retouching tools on glass plate negatives, scraping away wrinkles, double chins, and stray hairs, cinching waistlines, and even adding height to present an idealized, timeless image of the monarch. Apparently, it was small blades and fine pencils to physically scratch and paint over negatives before they printed them. And they used to smooth out lines and remove signs of aging. And Victoria famously went so far as to scratch her own face off of a glass plate negative from an 1852 family photo because she didn't like her expression. By her 1887 Golden Jubilee, critics and newspapers complained that the pictures were so heavily retouched that she looked more like a wax figure than a real person. This is not the British royal family, but I thought this was really something. The Sultan of Brunei stripped his daughter-in-law of royal titles over unbecoming behavior. She disrespected him with behavior unbecoming of the royal family. She's 33, and she was accused of showing lack of respect to the Sultan, who's 80 and the world's longest reigning living monarch, according to the national broadcaster news. The announcement did not specifically say what she did to offend him, nor did it provide additional information of the incident. But can you just imagine? The father is fourth in line to the throne of Brunei, a tiny nation surrounded by Malaysia and the South China Sea. In 2024, he met King Charles and Keir Starmer. Wow. All right, let's move on to Sarah Ferguson. This is kind of interesting. She apparently left her belongings, or a lot of her belongings, at Royal Lodge. A considerable amount of her personal property is still sitting there. And at some point, she's going to have to decide what to do with it. Now, she's moved around quite a bit since leaving Windsor. We know she was at a ski chalet in Austria, and then she's in Portugal. But yeah, she's going to have to figure out what to do with her stuff. All right, let's move into our Harry-Meghan stuff. It's being reported that Harry is looking at a quiet window this August to reach out to the king at Balmoral in an effort to continue rebuilding their relationship. And there is a brief period where the king will be staying there without Queen Camilla, potentially making him more accessible to personal direct contact from Harry. Harry knows exactly when his father is vulnerable, is what's being said, and that is moments when Charles is removed from the strict, formal, rigid schedules and protective palace advisors that normally dictate his routine. And with Camilla away on her own holiday break, they're saying that Harry thinks a low-key phone call or private message could reopen a line of communication that palace officials often tightly control. For those of you wondering where Camilla goes, she goes to Ray Mill. This is her personal retreat. She bought the country house after her divorce from Andrew Parker Bowles, and she kept it even after she married Charles. She goes there whenever she can, including the summer, to spend time with her children and grandchildren and get away from the formality of royal life. Now, that's an important distinction, because they spend time together in Scotland, at Birkhall on the Balmoral estate, but they also go here. Let's continue on. We have an update to that red carpet moment involving Meghan Markle and David Foster. And David Foster's decided to set the record straight. You know exactly what I'm talking about. They attended the David Foster Foundation 40th anniversary celebration, and they were posing for pictures. And there's a short clip that looks like, David Foster snubbed Meghan Markle. But according to him, that's not what happened. He gave a statement to People magazine denying that he ignored or snubbed Meghan. And he gave some context. He said that as the host of the event, he'd already personally greeted Harry and Meghan when they arrived 10 minutes before the red carpet encounter. So to him, when he walked past Meghan on the carpet, that wasn't the first time he'd seen her that evening. He'd already welcomed them. He said they were dear friends and praised them for spending time interacting with people at the event. And he was unhappy with the way the video was portrayed. Before we simply accept this explanation and move along, there's a couple of things that caught my attention. First of all, where did David Foster choose to make this statement? People magazine, I've referred to them before as Harry and Meghan's go-to magazine, their unofficial mouthpiece. And that's, my thought process. So I find the denial of this snub was given exclusively to People. Yeah, that reminded me of something else. Do you remember what happened with Dr. Chanduka and that awkward polo trophy presentation? And that's when Harry asked her to put out a statement and she said no. It makes you wonder what's really going on here. So here, once again, we have an awkward moment involving Meghan Markle caught on tape. It goes viral. Once again, people are interpreting what they believe they're seeing, except this time, David Foster steps forward to say something, and it appears exclusively in People magazine. Yeah. Let me point something out to you guys. Harry and Meghan take every charity event, birthday party, whatever, and turn it into a week-long media story about them, and they take all the attention. With Harry and Meghan, whatever they attend, there seems to be a second act. Look at what happened at Kris Jenner's birthday party. They attended, the photos appeared, they disappeared, different explanations followed, and months later, Kim Kardashian was still being asked about this ridiculous situation which overshadowed Kris Jenner's birthday party. Same thing happened with Martha Stewart. She was the keynote speaker at a charity event. Meghan was just a guest. She talks publicly about the encounter with Meghan, then another version, emerges, then it's a different event, same result, and now nobody's talking about the charity event. Everybody's talking about the interaction between Meghan and Martha Stewart. And now we have David Foster's 40th anniversary event. They want people to know they were invited, they're friends with the host, they weren't snubbed. But when something doesn't look quite right, somehow the explanation just becomes another story. And you have to wonder when all this image management is creating the very problem that it's supposed to solve. Because if David Foster hadn't issued a statement, that red carpet clip would have lasted a day. All Meghan had to do was stand there and pose for one photo, just like everywhere else, and it turns into something else. Now, one other thing happened. I don't know what to make of it. Apparently, the woman who was singing there said that she walked up to Harry and Meghan's table, and when she approached them, Meghan reached out, touched her stomach, and said, "This is the most beautiful time of your life, blah, blah, blah." Let me tell you something. When I was pregnant, I didn't want people touching me without permission. Ew. All right, now the next thing I want to talk about really quick is As Ever. Stay off the website, guys. They're mining your data. Well, what I find interesting is that she's trying to push this blackberry spread again, and she's putting up these pictures and trying to make you think that she's picking the fruit herself. Anyway, one of these little jars, which is only 7.6 ounces, is $12. So if you buy the bundle, that means it should be $36. Instead, if you buy the bundle, it's $42 because it comes in a box. Definitely not worth it. Now, the same thing for her spread, her strawberry spread. So I was at Costco the other day and I got 2 of these organic strawberry spreads, 24 ounces each, completely organic for $8. And I got to bring it home the same day, whereas her jar is 7.6 ounces and you have to pay for shipping. Now, she's trying to wheel everybody in with these ridiculous videos that mean nothing. It's her running around showing off her diamonds. That's all it is. Then you have very expensive honey. But the thing that really got me is the flower sprinkles. She is selling 0.18 ounce for $15. And then she puts a thing up showing how you can sprinkle it on cookies or on your French toast. Just as an FYI, you can get the same edible flowers on Amazon, and you can get an entire ounce, not 0.18 ounce, a whole ounce for $11. Don't be a fool. Don't buy Meghan Markle products. All right, continuing on with Meghan, there's a new report asking why she has not achieved the level of Hollywood success many expected after she and Harry got back to California. And apparently she wants to control her image. She's reluctant to appear on other people's podcasts because she might get unexpected or difficult questions in a long form interview. Now, the problem is all her other podcasts that she's been on, I think, had pre-done questions, if you know what I'm saying. She knew what was going to be asked. But podcasting is built around conversation and spontaneity. Audiences want unscripted moments where they feel they're seeing the real person rather than a carefully prepared public image. And Meghan's appearances are polished and rehearsed, so you don't see authentic moments. What's being said is when you have your own podcast, you can control it. You can control your guests, your editing, and you have much less control when you sit across from an experienced interviewer who can ask you anything. And Meghan understands branding and presentation, but audiences want something that can't be carefully planned. They want spontaneity. So perhaps the very thing that Meghan believes protects her image is making it harder for audiences to connect with her. And as for Harry, what they're saying is that he's a man on the edge. They're talking about his current state following his massive legal defeat. We're still waiting to hear from the judge of how much Harry's going to pay. I'm sure it's killing him, the waiting around. Well, there was some royal commentators who had some thoughts on what Harry needed. A big thank you to that one on Twitter for finding this. Listen to this.
He's lacking a group of mates there that he can go and have a beer with. I think if he had a group of 4 or 5 friends like he used to have in London, that ex-army guys or whatever, that he could let his hair down and have a few beers and go to a hockey match or whatever they do out there, a basketball game, as opposed to going with her. Actually have a group of male friends. I mean, it all sounds a bit misogynistic, but I think it would do him good, and I think it would. He could let off some steam, and I'm not saying he should get drunk and start falling out in nightclubs and punching photographers, but if he could actually go out and let his hair down, have a few drinks, enjoy himself, and talk to his mates, I think that would be a good thing. And I don't get the impression that happens.
I agree, and also not only his mates, his family. And you just think how close he was with his brother, people like Mike Tyndall. There's all those reporting after Zara and Mike's wedding, which they all went and, got plastered, at the wedding reception. There was a group of sort of mates there in the family that they could all let their hair down and have that sort of lived and shared experience, which we don't really understand because we're not members of the royal.
I honestly think Harry would handle the stress better if he had friends to go hang out and have a beer with. He has nobody. All right, let's move on to our big story for today. Okay, you guys, we're going to move on to what I consider to be the big story of the day. Richard Eden put out an article because he's bringing up something that Sarah Vine wrote about last week. Remember, we covered Sarah Vine's article. It was written for Meghan's 45th birthday. And in that article, we talked about the woman that went in for the job interview. She walked in, stood there, Meghan ignored her, then checked her up and down and said, "You can leave," and basically threw her out of her office. So obviously this story is coming out, and Richard Eden picked up on that and said that it probably reopened old wounds for people who used to work with Harry and Meghan. Remember, they're the Sussex Survivor Club. And you start to remember just how many stories we've heard about problems with staff over the years. You guys remember Melissa Chubati? She was Meghan's personal assistant. She left 6 months after the wedding, and at the time, people in the palace were surprised that somebody would leave such a prestigious job so quickly. But then, of course, we learned about Jason Knopf's complaint. Remember, in 2018, he was there, Harry and Meghan's communication secretary, and he wrote to Prince William's private secretary expressing concerns about Meghan's treatment of staff, and he alleged that 2 PAs had been bullied out of the household, and another employee's confidence was being undermined by Meghan. The part that bothers me, though, is we never got to see what they found. The palace said the review had finished and changes had been made to their HR policies, but we don't know what the report actually said. They wouldn't release it. And another interesting point is that Harry and Meghan have not exactly been out there demanding that the palace release the findings either. But I do find that interesting because if the report cleared Meghan, wouldn't you want it released? But there's something else you have to remember. The complaints didn't stop when Harry and Meghan left the royal family and moved to America. The Hollywood Reporter came out with its own story in 2024 about Harry and Meghan's workplace and reported allegations that Meghan belittled people. And that's where we got the infamous description of her as a dictator in high heels. And the Hollywood Reporter stood behind its reporting. Then we had that big Vanity Fair article in 2025. They spoke to people who had worked with Harry and Meghan as well. Only a few people had positive things to say. And I think, okay, it's important to mention that, but other people describe a very different experience. So now we're not just talking about complaints from Buckingham Palace, we're talking about allegations from both sides of the pond. Don't misunderstand me. People leave jobs all the time. But when you have this many people coming and going on both sides of the pond, and you hear similar stories over and over and over again, at some point, people are going to start asking questions. And that takes me on to Australia, because during Harry and Meghan's recent trip, there were a couple of moments where I thought we saw what I called at the time a mask slip. Now, there's two particular things I want to show you. One happened in a parking garage. That actually was before Australia. So Meghan's in the parking garage after an event. Look at her face and her demeanor and her interaction with the people around her. One woman actually ducks into a car, I think, to get, away from her. I mean, the body language here while she's dealing with her employees doesn't look good. Here's the one from Australia. The aide had the audacity to touch Harry. And I think Meghan was extremely upset that this woman laid hands on her husband. Let me show it to you again. I want you to look at Meghan's face. She seems to catch herself. She realizes that this is on camera and she immediately, puts a smile back on her face. But you see what's going on here. And so Richard Eden bringing this story back up is so interesting, because you've got the old palace allegations, the Jason Kanoff complaint, you've got an investigation whose findings we've never been allowed to see, you've got the Hollywood Reporter, Vanity Fair, Sarah Vine's story, and now we've got Richard Eden. So at some point, you just can't pretend these stories don't exist. And now that she's faced accusations for ill treatment on both sides of the pond, and Harry and Meghan have lost all those employees over the years, the stories keep coming. The stories keeps coming. It's followed them out of the palace. It's followed them all the way to California. And now we're talking about it again, which brings me back to my original question. What is in the Buckingham Palace report? Now, with that being said, I want to give you my own personal thoughts of what's in that report. I believe that they didn't release the report not because it would be bad on Meghan, but because it would reflect badly on the institution. I believe there were no processes in place for if you were having an issue with an actual royal family member. I believe that they realized that Meghan was able to bully these people and these people had no recourse, and therefore they've changed their policies, which holds the royal family to account for mistreatment of their employees. That's my honest opinion about what went on behind the scenes. Of course, Meghan's told people that she's been vindicated. We know she hasn't been vindicated. We also know that as soon as we found out about the investigation, she started sending letters to the palace demanding to know who was going to be involved in the investigation, and the palace basically told her to go jump. Again, my personal opinion, she wanted to know who was involved because she was going to threaten them. She was going to try to stop the bullying investigation. That's what I believe. But she was never vindicated, and I've now given you my opinion on what really went on behind the scenes. I don't know why anybody is the least bit surprised. We've all heard how Catherine jumped all over Meghan and told her off after Meghan was really mean, rude, and shouted at a member of Catherine's staff. Catherine always treated her staff like family. Who doesn't remember when the Queen had to pull Meghan aside during a taste testing for a cake because Meghan basically accused the chef of lying about what was in the cake? And the Queen pulled her aside and said, Meghan, we don't talk to people like that in this family. Or the stories that came out that she was really nasty to the head gardener. It seemed like Meghan liked to bully and be mean to people that she considered to be beneath her. That's the way I'm looking at it. I don't see any other way you can look at it. So no, I'm not surprised that once again, these bullying allegations are coming back to bite her in the rear. Well, I want to ask you guys a question. Do you think it's significant that we're still hearing the same kinds of stories years later on both sides of the pond? And what did you make of the Australia footage and the underground garage pictures? And let me know down in the comments. You guys know I love to read what you think. And if you're watching and you haven't subscribed yet, please consider hitting that like and subscribe button. We cover the royal family on here every day, not just the headlines about Harry and Meghan, but the working royals are actually out there doing really well. So thank you for spending part of your day with me. Don't forget to hit the like and the subscribe button and the bell for all notifications. Then go down into the description box where you'll find the link to my Twitter, my Gettr, my Rumble, my email, a link to my father's book, which remains everything's up for sale on Amazon, a link to my Amazon wish list, as well as a physical address. For those of you who have donated to my coffee fund, thank you so much. And as always, you guys, have a great day.